with the quickness. No, I don't need no assistance, no. Yeah, no playing it safe. I said let's get it, you say not today. What can I say? You ain't gon' go for it, get out the way. Yeah, got no time to waste. Can't be with me if you not at my pace. You not at my level, you not in my race. One foot on the gas, I'm pushing on brakes. Dancing with the devil, there's no recital. I'm killing competition, ain't no revival. I shoot it to kill it, I'm aiming for vitals. I'm showing no mercy when facing my rivals. Snakes in the grass, they getting exposed. I know they be lurking, I'm watching them close. Acting like friends, but really they foes. Saw they be scheming and said adios. Yeah, I gotta get it. Yeah, by any means. I gotta get it, the mindset. I gotta get it, the mindset. I gotta get it, the mindset.
The iRacing IndyCar Series heads to the French countryside for the 14 kilometers of the Circuit de la Sarthe to challenge these IndyCars in a way that mechanically they were not designed to be doing so. 85% of the lap spent at full throttle today is going to be about balancing your car, downforce versus the speed through some of the twistier sections at the very end of the lap. Hello everyone, welcome back to RaceSpotTV, where alongside myself, Arjuna Kankipati, delighted to be joined as always by Andrew Kinsella. And Andrew, Monday nights are where we have a lot of fun, we see lots of racing action. Today though, we go on a trip beyond the reality. We do something that we could never do in the real world.
Yeah, every season one track, it seems, is one of those fantasy tracks. Last season it was the Nürburgring, but this time, week 4 today, Circuit de la Sarthe. We all know what track that is in France there, and it should be a treat here today, Arjuna. I'm really looking forward to this. I think that it's going to be some fascinating, not just driving in terms of having to draft so much, but also in terms of the strategy. We were talking about that just before we came on air.
Here's a look at that schedule. After back-to-back road course races, we'll go back-to-back ovals, starting with a trip to Japan and Twin Ring Motegi before heading short track racing to Iowa. And then we'll go back to the flip-flop of road versus ovals. A quick look at your championships standings as they run right now. Brandon Traino has emerged back at the front, but today we'll have some familiar faces to be fighting with, the likes of Michele Costantini returning, as well as Phil Kraus, who dropped outside of the top 10. It's still very early in this championship, a long way to go. But of course, Andrew, we're coming off last season, the highest points total in series history.
Absolutely, and you look at those totals, and already we're on track to beat the totals from last season. Brandon Traino has had an absolutely immense season so far, almost 700 points through 3 weeks here so far, Arjuna. And of course, that's not even looking at the possibility of what drop weeks he'll have to consider. So he's looking at an absolutely monumental point total, but down a little bit further in that standings. Look at that battle we have going on for 3rd through 10th. Connor Harrington, Rashad Craig, Andreas Ike, Christian Steele, all within just 22 points of each other for 3rd place there. Some really tight action, and I think today is going to matter a lot more than these drivers really thought it might.
Unfortunately, I have to correct myself. Looks like Michele Costantini, after signing up for the race, technical issues. We'll see if he can get back in the server and ready for the race start, which is about 3 minutes away and counting. Let's talk about today's venue. Over 300,000 will descend in the French countryside once a year to celebrate all things endurance racing. Next year will mark the 100th anniversary and 100th running of this great 24-hour race. But it's 14 kilometers of mostly public roads, lots of high-speed corners at the end of the lap, but plenty of flat to the floor sections as well. We're expecting a draft party, Andrew, and like I was mentioning earlier, the balance of setups, having enough downforce for those twistier sections versus being trimmed to go as fast as you can. It's going to be a fascinating test of who's figured out what is best here today.
You're absolutely right about that. It's going to be a really interesting duel. I think there are going to be a number of different strategies. Even in just the Power Slide Discord, we were talking to some of our teammates, and they weren't exactly sure what downforce level would be the fastest here. And I think it will depend a little bit on the time of day that we have here and the weather conditions, but also just driver preference as well. Do you need that little bit extra downforce into twisty stuff, or do you want to go flat out down those long straightaways?
And so with Go Fast time underway right now, 2 minutes left on the qualifying clock before the grid is set. Brandon Traino currently sits at the top, where he seems to have just found a rich vein of form in qualifying, a full second clear of Team Talent and the private label Team Hype. Philip Kraus, Mitchell Welker back and forth behind Rashad Craig. Plenty of shaking up through the field. Still wait for Connor Harrington to come across the line. He'll try and challenge for pole position.
Yeah, we've got some big heavy hitters up at the front here, but we also have some names that maybe don't necessarily come out too much to these Monday nights, just giving this IndyCar a try, looking at the likes of Stefano I've got myself in a twist here.
We are, but that's one of these fun things. Of course, we're racing on America's Independence Day, July 4th. A lot of people out celebrating, so we have some new faces coming in. I see Dan Yeaman joining the session as well, so another one to be thinking about. When we talk about this race, let's talk about the tire life and the strategies that we're going to see here today. Remember, drivers are required to use both compounds of tires, but the red alternate softer compound of tire today, Andrew, expected to be, well, to say it's the less preferential tire would be a bit of an understatement.
It would indeed. That tire, the red tire, is just not going to last very long. Although I will say we do have a very cold track here today, so that will help things. But at the same time, I don't expect to see more than 2 laps done by anyone on a red tire here today in this 16-lap race. So that should tell you just how excruciating it is to be on the red tires for very much longer than that. But it is going to be very interesting to see how the strategy will work out, because you're looking at 6, maybe 7 laps on a stint, so it does get tight there. Just trying to make those red tires last the requisite stint you'll need to make them last. 16 laps, anywhere from 5 to 6 laps in terms of the fuel window. We're in for an interesting race when we think about the strategy implications that we'll see for what's estimated to be a 52-minute race here today at the Circuit de la Sarthe. We are ready, though,
for racing to get underway. An international flair to this 2022 Season 3 of the iRacing IndyCar Open Series. What does Le Mans have in store for us here today? It's Brandon Traynor that will lead us to the green flag with a 3:16.530 punching his ticket to pole position. For reference, LMP1 cars in that similar sort of ballpark for lap times. Connor Harrington, well, 14 kilometers, only 2/10 off the pace. Phil Krause with Sean Craig will line up behind them, but almost a full second back from your pole position winner. Mitchell Welker, David Porcelli will line up on row 3, while starting from 7th will be Sean Ryan, Dan Yeaman alongside him. Brendan Lichtenberg and Chris Wilhite make up the rest of the top 10, with Dave Roberts, Diego Ortiz 11th to 12th behind them. Christopher Demerit for Team i5G rolls from 13th alongside Benjamin Kopke in the number 8. Kevin Birrell 6 seconds off the pace, but surviving might just be enough to get a top 10 here today. Cameron J. Hill, the final a car with a lap time on the board. Michele Costantini with the Apex Racing team scrambling to try and make it back into the session in time to start back in 17th. Alongside him will be Stefano Calzabetta. Wow, that was bad. I see, Andrew, why you steered away from that one. Frankie D and Robert Malachka, 19th and 20th. No qualifying lap times on the board for them. And one thing that you did mention, Andrew, is the fact that weather conditions might play a big factor here today, because you take a look here at Le Mans, it is dark, it is overcast, it's cooler than expected. That red tire may last a little bit longer than drivers were planning.
Absolutely, and these drivers are going to need that to be the case, because again, it's going to be very tricky to make these red tires last more than a couple laps, and if my math is right, they're going to have to make them last 3 or 4, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens here. I do think that a lot of drivers here will at least start on this black primary tire. Only 2 drivers electing to go on the reds right away.
That is Dave Roberts and Benjamin Kopke. Michele Costantini unable to get back in time for a World Championship ranked driver. That is probably 200 I rating in the bin immediately. It'll be interesting to see if he can get back in at some point and try and salvage some of that. In this field, we are looking at some decent points on the line as well, Andrew, and for someone like Brandon Traynor, as he tries to build up momentum through this month of July, this is going to be a crucial race, because Le Mans is very different to anything we'll do for the rest of this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at some of the names in this field, the strength of field is fairly high on this one, so it's definitely not a race that Brandon Traynor can afford to just take off here, because there is a lot of points on offer, and he does have some fairly hungry drivers hunting him down here today, particularly that number 6 car of Connor Harrington starting alongside of the 4 car Brandon Traynor. Harrington is looking really strong here, along with Phil Krause. The private label team Hype positioned really well at the front here.
Can Krause and Harrington draft together, work in tandem to bully Brandon Traynor with these long straightaways? Downforce configuration will very much come into play. Watch for potentially David Porcelli to work his way forward. Mitchell Welker, we know just how aggressive that he likes to be here in these races. The jets fly, the tricolor above the Circuit de la Sarthe. We're ready to go racing. The pace car pulls off. In just a moment, it will peel off right-hand side. Fielding control of Brandon Traynor for 16 laps here in these Dallara IR18s at the home of one of your Triple Crowns in global motorsport. Single file immediately as they get underway. We're racing at the Circuit de la Sarthe. Brandon Traynor, as well as Harrington and Krause, all single filing themselves out. They're getting ordered out further back in the midst of the top 15 or so. A nice clean breakaway. Traynor already 6/10 clear on the run through the chicane.
Yeah, really nice start there from Traynor. We got some smoke in the background there. Looks like a couple cars going along at the chicane there. I think that we all will rejoin here, but right now the story is up front. Brandon Traynor starting to stretch it out over Connor Harrington, and Connor Harrington's gonna have to be careful there. It's almost a second already, and he's gonna almost start to lose draft range if he's not careful. It's gonna be very important for him, maybe even burn a push to pass here in order to regain the draft of Brandon Traynor, and Phil Krause right along behind Connor Harrington as well.
Already looking like maybe 3 gaps starting to form, 3 packs rather starting to form. Rashad Craig looks to have got a slow down penalty. Oh, so painful on lap 1 here. He pulls right-hand side of the track, will fall all the way back in line to 9th position, slots in behind the hyperstar of Brendan Lichtenberg. 1 second, 1.1 the gap between Traino and Harrington as they immediately form themselves up into the draft. Welker 1 second back as well. Has got to be careful as we come down to the end of the Mulsanne not to make a mistake. He needs to stay all the way in the draft before we get down to the slower corners midway through the lap.
Yeah, but this just goes to show you, Arjuna, just how important it is to have a car that not only works well in a straight line, but also in the corners, because every time we've come into a corner so far, Brandon Traino has just gapped Connor Harrington by a tenth or two. So you can really tell that the i5G car up front is working very well, not just in a straight line, but also in the corners.
Wonder what it might have been like with Michele Costantini in the field. Maybe some Indy 500-esque swap drafting at the front of the field. Mitchell Welker locking up the right front. So easy to do at one of the slower points at the lap as you get to the end of the Mulsanne. You work yourself in towards Indianapolis and Arnage. When the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup came here, they were 3-4 wide, plenty of drama as they funneled themselves down into Indianapolis, a very high commitment corner that leads you down to the slowest part of the track. We see the two contrasts required from the car in terms of setup.
Yeah, the Indianapolis complex here is very, very difficult, especially in a car that's as trimmed out as all of these drivers are. It's a very technical section. You seem like you're going so slowly through these corners, but in reality, they're very, very important to maximize your lap time, and you can't afford to screw up these, especially if you're starting to lose the draft like Connor Harrington is.
It's so close, and through the Porsche curves will maybe a bit more downforce for the private label team hype cars enable them to close up to Brandon Traino, but in fact, if anything, the gap is opened up now 1.4 and climbing as they work themselves through the exit of the Porsche curves down in towards the first of two chicanes that complete the lap. That i5G Apex Racing team car at the front of the field looks an absolute rocket ship.
It does. Brandon Traino has been so neat and tidy throughout this lap as well. He's really not seeming to push too hard here. He's just taking what the car is giving him, and right now that car is working a treat. So if I'm Connor Harrington, I'd be a little bit frightened by the pace of Brandon Traino on that first lap.
There are some fun fights starting to develop further back in the field. At the front, they're tidy. Diego Ortiz may have just come down onto pit road very early on the primary tire initially. Now, will he elect to sacrifice himself and bail out as Sean Ryan has been escorted off the track through the opening couple of corners at the Dunlop chicane, trying to get back up to speed, but he's dropped all the way back to 11th.
Yeah, and it just goes to show when you have a draft lock track like this, just a small mistake can cost you so many positions, because you really need or you really do lose a lot of time getting yourself back on track, because there is a fair bit of runoff here, and Ryan is unfortunately just continuing to lose positions here. Looks like he might have gotten a slowdown to add insult to injury.
At least it's not on lap number one, where they tend to be a little bit more exaggerated in how much time you have to give up in order to get back up to racing speed. Let's start with dialing ourselves towards a look at the race start and what happened further back in the field as they threw themselves through turn one. Just miscommunication. Dave Roberts gets absolutely murdered by, I believe that was Diego Ortiz. Roberts then slides straight into the path of Chris Wilhite.
Nothing Wilhite could do there, unfortunately, and that's going to put Wilhite well down the order. And I believe Roberts is probably going to retire after that. So just some unfortunate incidents, and it's so easy to happen at that first corner because you do have the gentle right-hander, and it's very difficult to predict whether the car in front of you is going to stay sort of on the traditional racing line through there on lap one, or whether they're going to defend, and just a small miscommunication, and that's the result.
You could see that Wilhite tried to actually get out of the way, opened up the corner, but not in time to actually enable him to get away scot-free. Here comes a swap around. Kraus on the push to pass and looking to build forward, slides his way past Connor Harrington in the second of the private label Team Hype machines. Gap holding steady at 1.5 as they work themselves through Arnage in towards Indianapolis for the second time, and Phil Kraus got all sorts of loose, managed to hang on. Harrington works his way back forward. Gap opens up to 1.8.
That was lightning hands from Phil Kraus, your Lionheart Series point leader, I might add, and he's showing why with reaction times like that, Arjuna. That car was all kinds of out of shape there.
Look from Connor Harrington as now Mitchell Welker electing not to go for the move on the entry into the first of the highest speed corners of the track, through a double left through the Porsche curves before arcing that momentum out wide and tightening it back in with the amount of downforce that some of these cars are running. Able to run a little bit tighter before they exit that sequence of corners at Corvette. Got to be very careful not to push out too wide and get yourself into an off-track situation where you get a slowdown penalty. It's easy to do. Here's a look what happened to Sean Ryan, and unlike what happened on lap 1, this time just cuts too early through the first part of the chicane. That bounces his car around. Lucky maybe to get away without floor damage there.
Yeah, there are some raised sausage curb like objects on the inside there that you can see just as Connor Harrington was going by there, and it can really upset the car, because the car will not only will the suspension bounce, but the car will bottom out on those curbs. And as you say, he'd be lucky to escape any sort of floor damage there with how hard he hit them. But hopefully he's able to continue on here. But he has gone all the way down to 14th position now and 20 seconds back of the leader. So it doesn't seem like that car's necessarily working as well as it was early on in the race, Arjuna.
Not too many drivers electing to work through their allotments of push to pass just yet in this race. David Porcelli at the end of the chasing pack. Welker, Kraus, Harrington in front of him with the gap up to 2.1 seconds through the first of the chicanes on the Mulsanne. Harrington getting very wide, out of drafting range right now. And again, the setups that Brandon Traino seems to arrive at these racetracks with week in, week out just seems to be dialed in for whatever the conditions may be. Very much looking on a roll. Here's a look at what happened to Phil Kraus, and it was getting off into that gravel that really got him in trouble.
Yeah, just a couple of inches too wide through the corner there, and just gets onto the gravel, and as soon as he does, the back end steps out, and he was full opposite lock saving that one. Really nice save, but unfortunately what that's done is that incident was basically the catalyst to allow Brandon Traino to escape from this pack of 4 that is chasing him. So while it was a great save, it's also basically sealed the fate of this pack behind them.
Kraus has dropped behind Mitchell Welker as well now in this battle up front. 5 seconds between Porcelli and Yeaman for 5th and 6th positions at the time being. Yeaman being chased down by Lichtenberg, Craig, Demerit, then a further pack behind them with Robert Malechka and Cameron Hill, 15th and 16th. The last cars running without any sort of an incident, Chris Wilhite, after the lap 1 moment he had with Diego Ortiz and Dave Roberts, is still running, albeit after a trip down into pit lane. Ortiz and Roberts appear to have joined Michele Costantini in retiring from the race. Lichtenberg getting in front of Yeaman at one of the more treacherous parts of the course to really make something happen in terms of losing time to those behind. He's getting through, but now does Craig elect to follow through?
I think if you're Craig, you have to, and same with Demerit at the tail end of this train as well, because you're just losing time hand over fist behind Yeaman to start here. So it really is, you need, in a situation like this, you need to have the fastest car in the front of the train, and it was very obvious for a bit now that Lichtenberg has that speed, especially where he presumably has a very similar setup to the number 4 car Brandon Traino, his teammate up front.
Craig trying to set up a move into those chicanes at the end of the lap, has to back out of it, lose a little bit of ground to Yeaman, Lichtenberg in front as they'll cross the line to complete lap number 3. Again, left side of the screen you can see the tire compounds for those still left on track. Only Kopke in the number 8 on the red mark alternate tire. Question will be when the rest of these drivers elect to switch on over. Lichtenberg makes a mess of that chicane to start the lap. Now Yeaman's not going to commit too early, breaking away slightly from Craig, but very much still in draft territory. And in terms of pressure, I think Connor Harrington is starting to feel it. 3.7 back from Traino. Mitchell Welker closing in the rear view mirrors.
Yes, and David Porcelli's gotten around Phil Kraus as well, so it looks like these private label team hype cars are not necessarily very happy right now. Certainly it does look like Porcelli and Welker have a faster car at this stage of the run, so that's very interesting to see this battle developing here, because I don't know how much longer Welker and Porcelli are going to be content to hide behind Connor Harrington here, especially with Brandon Traino starting to distance himself in front.
Here's a great camera shot down the Mulsanne with that chicane interjected. You see the gaps forming between these packs of cars. There's a look to the inside at the second chicane by Mitchell Welker, who will nice and tidily slot his way through to second. But crucially now, if he's not faster than Connor Harrington in terms of being able to pull the gap closer to Brandon Traino, he's the one punching the hole in the air. He's the one who's going to be leading these guys around in the choo-choo train.
Absolutely, but David Porcelli is starting to look racy as well here. Maybe he might be making an attempt here.
Backs out of it as they sweep their way back onto the power. The private label Team Hype cars do look a little bit better in the corners, sliding backwards in the straight. Welker already has a 0.4 of a second gap to Harrington in the battle for second.
And here comes David Porcelli. It looks like he's going to be much more comfortable down this straightaway, but they're still side by side here in Indianapolis.
But Porcelli should just about be able to get it done. Look at the commitment all the way through the Camberton entry into Arnage in Indianapolis. David Porcelli demotes Harrington to fourth. The private label Team Hype machines out of the podium spots for the time being.
And that's really surprising, especially with the speed that Harrington and Kraus showed in qualifying. You almost have to wonder if there's maybe some fuel number that they're trying to hit here, because normally you wouldn't see the private label Team Hype drivers drop back like this here, Arjuna.
Maybe it's to try and get an extra lap or so out of these black primary tires. Run a little bit fewer, run a little bit shorter on the red mark alternate tire. Although having said that, Brandon Traino with a 5-second lead is already at the point where if he wanted to play any sort of fuel number, play the fuel game, he could do so. Look how tidy that car looks through the final corner, back on to the main straightaway. Brandon Traino controlling the tempo of the field. Harrington makes a little bit of a mistake through the final corner, bobbles as Traino punches in yet another fastest lap, a 3:19.705. These private label Team Hype cars, if they want to play any sort of fuel game, can't afford to lose the track of those in front.
Yeah, they are quickly falling down here, and you can just see that, particularly Harrington right now, he's just not happy on corner exits. The car's not settling down the way he needs to get the power down, and it's really hurting him, not just on the corner exit, but that speed carries down these long straightaways. So I think that's really what's going on with the Team Hype cars, is the corner exit is just not working for them right now.
Is there anything they can do in pit lane as Kopka becomes the first to pit? Has got his mandatory stint on the red mark alternate tire out of the way. Let's have a look at something else that's befallen Sean Ryan, this time down into one of the chicanes, commits very optimistically, spins it around, and I wonder if there's going to be something subsequent on the rejoin potentially. It's a treacherous place to be stuck, but he navigates that situation just about as well as you could hope. Whoa, that was close.
A little bit of a heart attack moment there for Rob Belechka as he tries to make his way up through this field, but yeah, that was suboptimal, is I believe the word to use there. Ryan just gets back on the throttle too quick, and you can tell that he's sort of driving a little bit over his head right now, trying to make up for his earlier mistake, and it's just causing a sort of a cascade effect right now. So unfortunate day so far for Sean Ryan.
How much worse can it get? Just listen to these engines, by the way. 85% of the lap or so spent at full throttle here. It's a big challenge for those engines, for anyone who was running Chevy engines just yesterday in the NTT IndyCar Series race at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course. Wouldn't trust their engines to run at that capacity, although having said that, Chevy have been remarkable in 2022. 6 seconds, the gap that Traino enjoys over Welker, Porcelli, Harrington, and Kraus. Lichtenberg continues to lead pack number 3, with Gaiman now dropping to the very tail end of that pack. If you're approaching the rest of this race, Andrew, and you're thinking about the tire compounds, you're thinking about the strategy, how do you approach the final 10, 11, 12 laps of this race?
I think it's all about the fuel right now, Arjuna. I think you've got to be conservative on this stint and try and get this stint to go as long as it possibly can. because basically if you go 2 stints of 6, that will take you to lap 12. That means a 4-lap stint on the red tires, and we've already seen that the red tires will not last very long. Kopke's already off those red tires. The other thing to keep in mind is we are in the morning here, so as the run goes on, it will get a little bit hotter. It is still very cold on track, 21 degrees Celsius track temp, but that will start to rise as this goes on, and every degree that track temperature rises, the red tires will get worse and worse over the course of a run.
It's probably going to be slightly marginal given the way that it's trending right now, as through the final chicane, Mitchell Welker sweeps once more. It is something to keep in mind. Traino faster yet, 3:19.425 as he works lap 6 on the black mark primary tire to start this race off. Still has not committed too heavily to using the push to pass, has only burnt through a single one of your 10 allotments early in this race. Brendan Lichtenberg, you'd think, got a slowdown penalty through the final corner. He drops to the tailing end of this pack.
It could be that, Arjuna, or it could be that he realized he's just a little bit short on fuel to get back around, because we would anticipate him probably getting into the pits this time by, so he might have had to just drop to the back of this train, get a little bit of draft assistance here for the remainder of this lap.
See if we can pick that one up as they sweep through Tretre Rouge back onto the Mulsanne. So see Lichtenberg run a little bit wide and then through here. Oh yeah. Just pushes all the way too wide, and the worst part about that is it takes him so long to get into a position to be able to clear the rest of the slowdown.
Yeah, that's one of the things about this track is it does take a fairly long time to clear the slowdowns, just because of how much advantage there is to potentially gain on the exit of some of these corners, particularly if you don't make a mistake but go out there on purpose. So the slowdowns are fairly punitive here, and it definitely took Brendan Lichtenberg longer than he was hoping for to clear that slowdown.
And all the while, the 17 Calasiabetta is closing. The name that stumped both myself and Andrew. At least we'll get it correct, somewhat correct once so far in this race, working towards the halfway marker. 7.6 the advantage that Brandon Traino has over Mitchell Welker and company. It's growing at more than a second per lap, at least for the time being. Welker all the way down through the gears, feeling that pressure. Porcelli behind. Harrington and Krause have been able to stabilize their cars, looking a little bit more comfortable at the end of this fuel run.
Yeah, it certainly seems like the balance is coming back toward the private label team hype drivers, but the car that's really caught my eye, at least right now, is David Porcelli. He just seems to be content to ride behind Mitchell Welker now that he's in second place and save the fuel. But at the same time, he's looked very racy, and he's got one of the fastest cars in a straight line, so that could come into play later on in this race.
Expecting cars down to pit road this time by. Porcelli maybe even holding up Krause and Harrington, who seem to have a little bit more downforce, a little bit quicker through the corners. As they get onto the power, though, as they pull down these straights, the gaps begin to open up, albeit slightly. The margins oh so fine at this point in time. Through the Porsche curves again, Welker leading, second on back. Brandon Traino nice and comfortably already working his way down towards the pit commitment line. To the right side he goes. Here comes your leader to pit road.
This is not an easy pit entry either, Arjuna. It really does require a lot of commitment, and you saw that on Brandon Traino's face. Interestingly enough, though, 2 cars going along here, and it is in fact the private label team hype duo of Phil Krause and Connor Harrington, so there was, I think, a little bit of fuel games being played by the private label team hype drivers.
At this point, though, the reality is Traino is gone. Say goodbye to a chance to fight for the win for Harrington, for Krause. They're looking now to just make sure they execute to try and get those other cars that they're fighting for the lead. Welker, Porcelli out of this battle. Traino drops off the jacks and rolls nice and tidily. 9.9 seconds stationary in pit lane. The rest of the cars begin to roll as well. David Porcelli has gone over to the red mark alternate tire with an uber short pit stop. We know what his intentions are.
Yeah, Porcelli with the undercut on the pit stop, basically he's going for a very, very short stint. He filled it with as little fuel as possible in order to make his 4-lap stint here work. So
Traino's around!
Oh, Traino's around!
Brandon Traino, dominant and controlling this tempo of this race, has lost it on cold tires. You can see the frustration, you can see the exasperation on his face. I just said that Kraus and Harrington weren't fighting for potentially the lead of the race as they swap around at the front. That might not be the case.
Yeah, so Traino's slotted in behind Mitchell Welker now, so that means Porcelli and Welker around, and that will surely put Harrington and Kraus around Traino as well. So that was just a disastrous moment for Brandon Traino, but at the same time it could have been so much worse because Traino was able to keep it out of the tire wall there. He was able to use all the runoff that he had to in order to do it, and he's got some work to do, but we do know that if there's one driver who can recover, it is Brandon Traino. He's definitely shown the speed to do so.
It's already, 9 seconds clear entering into the pit stop cycle. It would be very hard to say that it's still not in his wheelhouse to get back into winning ways. Michele Costantini, by the way, back out on track after his internet issues, will cycle to the lead, or rather will cycle back on track and mitigate the iRacing damage that seems to be looming large. Here's that group at the front, Kraus and Harrington doing that swap drafting to tandem their way forward. They would have just gotten word on that drama. Let's pick up the RaceSpotTV replay. Let's see what happens. And it's just on those colder tires. Commits like the tires are up to temperature. It's one of the more difficult things about adapting when you come back off of pit lane. Brandon Traino caught out on the cold tires.
Yeah, particularly if you have a car where you need to sort of adjust the tools as the run goes on. It may just be that Traino forgot to adjust it back on that pit stop, and he just had a looser race car than he was anticipating there, because that was a big moment for him through those corners there. So nice save from Traino, and it looks like he's back on track and back getting closer to the back of Mitchell Welker now.
So Kraus and Harrington will come down this time around. Teammates attacking on pit lane as they get down to those yellow cones, get onto the limiter. As we get closer to the halfway mark of the race, do they go to the alternates for a short run? Do they stay on the primaries for a splash and dash at the end of the race, which might just play out in their favor? We'll watch as well as Mitchell Welker currently sits net second behind David Porcelli as they work their way through the final couple of corners. You can already see Brandon Traino was close. Harrington and Kraus go up on the jacks. What do they do in pit lane?
We're about to find out, and it looks like they're staying on the black tires here, Arjuna.
And Porcelli with that undercut will take the lead of the race, but with the undercut in terms of fresh tires, Mitchell Welker will split the private label Team-Mike machines. Not that bad in terms of the race situation, Andrew, because of course you'd expect Kraus and Harrington to sync up once again and go into fuel-saving mode.
Well, here's the thing, Arjuna, is now that they've done that once, I don't know that they necessarily need to do it again. I think that we might see them have a 6-lap stint here, and then especially with Brandon Traino right on the back of Connor Harrington right now, if they can keep Brandon Traino behind them here, they might just abandon the fuel save and go full out on this stint. Yeah,
that's the face of a man who's not willing to dilly-dally around at all. He's working forward. You just saw how he launched the car through Tetra Rouge, was flogging that machine for all she's worth for the time being. Concentration on his face, and maybe for the first time, like we were saying earlier, a little bit of frustration seeping in. 4 seconds back from Porcelli, who's trying to run away with those red tires for the time being. Phil Kraus going on the charge, though, using the push-to-pass to try and get past Mitchell Welker. They're starting to be a little bit more aggressive with their use of the extra horsepower.
Yeah, and I like Kraus sort of leapfrogging with Mitchell Welker here. That's going to do everything that they possibly can do to, 1, close up on David Porcelli, but 2, keep Brandon Traino just that little bit further back, because the draft does get stronger the closer you are to the car in front. Right now, Traino still a good second behind Mitchell Welker, so he's not yet getting that full effect of the draft, but you can definitely tell that Treno is a man on a mission, and he's driving with a purpose here.
It'll be the halfway mark of the race this time by Porcelli, trying to use the advantage of the tyres by getting on to the 50, 60, 70 horsepower spurt that he's getting from that push to pass. And very much like in the real world in the NTT IndyCar Series, these Monday nights, Andrews, you can never be totally ready for what's going to happen. You have to expect the unexpected. It's why we love sitting down on a Monday night and watching some official iRacing competition.
The question I have, Arjuna, is which set of teammates is going to fulfill the Andretti Autosport role today?
Oof. Yeah, the less said about that, the better, I think, probably.
It was certainly an interesting approach to team tactics.
Have we ever seen that in sim racing, at least recently? Nothing springs to my mind. Seen it plenty in the past, but over the last 12 months, some teammates have been a little bit more restrained. You've been commentating on a fair few things.
I don't. Well, so I know there is one race that springs to mind immediately, and that is the 2018 Indy 500.
Yeah, but that's again,
but that
4
was so
years
long
ago.
About the only, I can't think of teammates doing that in sim in the last 12 months. I honestly can't.
I'm trying to think if it's happened in the World Championship setting just yet. I don't think it has. Brandon Treno has closed on the back of Welker, by the way. Likely now between Kraus, Welker, Treno, and Harrington, because they are closing on Porcelli. That gap down to 1.5. Porcelli knows that he needs to run as long as he can. Treno faster yet, seems to be just finding lap time. Every single strip around these 14 kilometers finds a 10th there, a 10th here. Corner by corner, working his way forward. And with Brandon Treno still having 7 push to passes left, you'd expect as he comes through Tetra Rouge, pushes out wide, not going to be long before he gets on the button. There he is, Phil Kraus slowdown penalty.
Oh no, that's disastrous for Kraus, because he had he had gotten up to about a good second on Mitchell Welker there, and now he's going to have to slot in behind Brandon Treno here. So all of that work that Kraus was doing up at the front, that's all gone for naught in one single slowdown penalty. Meanwhile, Brandon Treno around Mitchell Welker into the first chicane on the Mulsanne.
Oh, but look how loose that car is on the exit, even as it gets back onto the main part of the Mulsanne. Rear end, all sorts of loose. Brandon Treno, nice and comfortable for the time being. 2.2, the gap then between Porcelli and Treno. A little bit of respite given to the Satellite Racing driver after Phil Kraus's mistake through Tetra Rouge. Let's dial up the RaceSpotTV replay and see what happened to him. He had a slowdown from before, didn't he? Surely.
It surely had to have been before. It can't be the Team Talent playing more strategy here, can it?
Chicane is easy to turn in a little bit too early. Yep,
there
4 tires inside of the white there.
Yeah, so it was on the Dunlap chicane. Too anxious to get across the chicane there, and that was the slowdown. But it has brought these 4 right back together, and I will say the amount that they have pulled in on David Porcelli, it really does indicate just how much those red tires fade after just this is his 3rd lap on these tires here, Arjuna, and he is losing time hand over fist to the 4 black shod runners behind him.
And that's why we suspected that for Kraus and Harrington at the very least, even if they're not cutting a pit stop out and making their lives a little bit easier at the end. 1 fewer lap potentially on that red mark alternate soft tire. Welker not so tidy through the slowest part of this track. The 90-degree corner as they work themselves back up to speed in towards the portion curves. Benjamin Kopke and Robert Malechka, well, 1 and 1 equals 2. Surely those 2 cars had some sort of contact.
One would suspect that there was a little bit of contact there, yes. But back to the lead of the race, Brandon Treno under a second to David Porcelli, and you can just see hand over fist that Treno is gaining on Porcelli through the twisty sections here.
Just so easy as the tires go to pull up to the car in front, and Porcelli has got to survive 1 more lap, 14 more kilometers, final couple of corners through the chicane. He's bouncing his way all the way through the curve. Surely that cannot be the preferred way to work your way through the corner. Trainer, though, after his mistake, almost back to the race lead. It's why we say in motorsports, Andrew, and this track is maybe the best way to visualize that. You never give up in races as long as this. Even if you have 1 mistake, 2 mistakes, 3 mistakes, you keep pushing. Traino still looking for the race lead, forces Porcelli to go very defensive with the up and under on the run into Tetra Rouge. Brandon Traino takes the race lead back.
Oh, and Mitchell Welker nearly into the back of it, but Traino goes wide on the exit at Tetra Rouge, and I think he might have just got a slowdown there.
I don't know, but no draft benefit being given. None of these drivers on the push to pass. Maybe some bump drafting going on there. Mitchell Welker forcing and urging David Porcelli to the outside as they fly down into the first chicane here on the Mulsanne straight at the Circuit de la Sarthe. Phil Kraus blows through the corner, hits the back of Brandon Traino, spears off into David Porcelli as well. Phil Kraus causing all sorts of chaos.
Yes, that was a bit clumsy there from Phil Kraus, unfortunately. It looks like he may have gotten the worst of it there, but definitely not the best moment there. But that was a strange one that you're seeing on the replay there with Kopke and Malechka. It looks like Kopke just almost stopped right in the braking zone right in front of Robert Malechka there.
Maybe some technical issues for Malechka we're hearing as well. It just seemed like maybe he missed the braking zone as well. Very similar to Phil Kraus. The difference is the implications from one moment of potential madness. Here's a look at that replay as they flew their way down into that first heavy braking zone on the Mulsanne. Phil Kraus just trying to push the issue. Bumps his way through into first Brandon Traino and then into David Porcelli. The crucial thing was Brandon Traino got a slow down penalty for cutting part of that first chicane. Mitchell Welker has taken the race lead.
And lurking right behind the two of them, Connor Harrington was able to emerge through there completely unscathed. I'm not sure whether Welker got any little bit of that or not, but if there's one car that is completely clean right now, it would be that number 6 of Connor Harrington.
We ride on board with that private label Team Hype car. Traino backs up the entry into the left-hand cambered in corner that leads to the slowest part of the track. As he looks to work his way back into the race lead. Earliest time that you'd envision these drivers want to come in, Andrew, because you could get a bit of an undercut with those red tires, the softer compound tire, biting in initially as you roll off a pit lane. You'll feel the price, though, at the end of the race.
Yeah, I would say, Porcelli should be in at the end of this lap, but Traino, I wouldn't want to come in if I were Traino before lap 12. Harrington, 13, but if I could stretch it to 14 like I did that first stint, then I might do that so that I just have that 2-lap run at the end on low fuel and just might do my last gasp there. But certainly if I'm Brandon Traino, lap 12 is as soon as I want to come into the pits.
So Mitchell Welker will lead as we finish up lap 10 of 16 here in round 4 of this iRacing IndyCar Open Season 3 of 2022. Traino, Harrington behind. David Porcelli in the satellite racing number 2 does indeed come down to pit lane for the final time today. Phil Kraus will follow him, although Phil Kraus is going to have a long way to go. 6 laps on red compound tires. Let's see if Phil Kraus has to come back down onto pit road at some point in today's race. Demerit, after going onto the alternates, also down to pit road. We saw a couple of cars trying out through this middle portion of the race the softer compound tire.
Yeah, and I do like the strategy of the middle red stint here, providing, of course, that you don't have drama such as Porcelli did, but some of these drivers, they definitely needed to do something a little bit different to try to turn their race around, so don't hate that. But Kraus, he's down on pit lane solely because he lost his front wing in that whole debacle down at the chicane, and he was almost 7 seconds slow that lap, so he needed to come down and get that front wing. But it'll be interesting to see what his play is in terms of the tires, because as you say, 6 laps on reds is a very tall order here.
So now a question looms in my mind. Is there any potential rear wing damage on Brandon Traino's car? Now we know that Mitchell Welker seems to be fairly trimmed out as well, so I'm not trying to judge by top end performance of that Apex Racing team with Team i5G black, white and red machine that's tucked up behind Welker, but you have to think how hard that contact was as Phil Kraus sent it into the back of Brandon Traino. Looks to be maybe saving some fuel right now as well. Is he concerned that his pit stop is going to be lengthier than he'd like?
Well, yeah, I would suspect that Treno has at least some rear wing damage because he was blowing by Welker before and making it look easy, and now he's just content to ride here. So I suspect that if he could get by Welker right now that he would, because there's not that big of a fuel save that he could do that could potentially get him to 7 laps here, I don't think. So, yeah, I tend to think that he's likely to have damage here, which will make this final stint very, very interesting.
Does he have a look now? No, we'll back out of it. Remember how lengthy that pit stop will be if there is required repairs when they roll themselves onto pit road in likely 2 to 3 laps time. Treno nice and committed through the middle of the corner, pushes out wide but doesn't run too close to the tire barrier. David Porcelli has plenty of clean air to work with. Going through his push to passes, left with 4 in this race. You have to wait and see what the lap times are going to be for him as he tries to get his own undercut working. Several laps though of running by himself with no draft benefit either.
Yeah, it'll be very important for Porcelli to nail these laps from a driving standpoint. He's got to almost treat these laps as if they're qualifying laps to really maximize his potential here. The 2 seconds that he dropped because of that incident really hurt him in terms of what he's able to do. But I think it'll also come down to just how long these drivers are able to go in front of him on this middle stint here. Because if they're able to cut it down to 3, even 2 lap stints, if it's Connor Harrington, it could be a big advantage for a red tire short stint like that.
Remember what happened to start our season off. At America's National Park of Speed, Brandon Treno was the dominant force. On a different strategy, back in the field, got mixed up with traffic, took himself out, and Adam Blocker then took the lead of the race and ran well straight into trouble. Connor Harrington inherited the lead in the closing stages and took the victory to start our season off. Today, he sits in 3rd again. Welker and Treno battling in front of him. Will it be deja vu? He is sliding backwards, might have got a slowdown penalty.
I think that Connor, at this point, he's just dropped out of the draft just a little bit, and that tells me that the way that Connor's been running, he seems to have been in a very low fuel map, so I think he's been saving this entire stint as well, Arjuna. So look for Connor to maybe go to all the way to lap 14 here, and then just do a 2-lap stint on Reds to end this race.
Harrington on the push to pass to try and close back up. Treno is finally alongside on the run down into the 2nd chicane here at the Circuit de la Sarthe. Michele Costantini will steal away the fastest lap of the race, but Brandon Treno hits the point once more.
Yeah, he'll at least temporarily have it because, of course, Treno has not been on a red stint yet, and he might have a reply on that first flying lap with the red tires, but I think this is a signal that Treno is probably coming down pit road this time by, because it does pay to have that open entry to pit lane, especially on a high commit pit entry like Circuit de la Sarthe is. It really does pay to have that clear entry in front of you to maximize those corners. So I think that is the signal from Treno that he's probably coming down this time by.
Might be a lap more than he'd want in terms of being on primary, the alternate compound tire. Mitchell Welker, though, might not play so easily into the plans of Brandon Treno. Around the outside, down the hill, Welker will take back the race lead as we fight tooth and nail, hammer and tong into the pit stop cycle that might determine the course of this race.
It all comes down to what happens in the next couple of laps. Will Treno be hampered by a slow pit stop because of required repairs? What will Welker do? Will he stretch it out 1 lap, or will he be coming down here this time by? And then Connor Harrington, I think he is the wild card in all this. If he can go another 2 laps, he's going to be able to push those red tires to the absolute maximum on low fuel, and he might just be able to steal this one away.
Speaking of Connor Harrington, he did indeed have a slowdown penalty. Let's show it to you because it wasn't on the inside. He gets loose and he pushes out wide 4 tires to the left side of the white line, and that is why, coming out of Tetra Rouge, Harrington slowed down. There go the leaders to pit lane. Trainer almost running over Welker as they got down towards the entry. Harrington will stay out. The question is, for how many laps will the private label Team Hype be able to extend?
And you can see Trano is basically alongside Welker here. He is trying to maximize this pit lane as much as he possibly can, and you can just tell that he was chafing that he allowed Welker to get back around him there and sort of foul up that pit entry for him. But it all comes down to this: will Trano have required repairs that will keep him in pit lane too long?
So let's see, for the Apex Racing team with Team i5G machine, drops but does not roll. Damage repairs for Brandon Trano will force him to go on a monster of a charge in the second half of this race. 20 seconds and counting. Trano still yet to roll.
Yeah, it's a 20-second required repair, unfortunately, Arjuna, so that takes Brandon Trano so far out of touch here that it's going to be very, very difficult. He's got basically 13 seconds to make up to Mitchell Welker right now, and just 3 seconds to even get back to Phil Kraus in front of him.
Does not seem realistic. We'll wait and see then. Trano maybe trying to battle with Phil Kraus to get at least some bragging rights. It's Harrington versus Welker, the fight that we're watching now. Daniel Yeaman on his debut here on a Monday night in front of veteran Rashad Craig in the Indy Alliance Racing number 7. As they slink their way down the Mulsanne once more. Malechka down to pit road, 15 and counting for him. Some potential damage repairs for him, of course, after that moment that they had down at Indianapolis at the very end of the Mulsanne. Michele Costantini might have gone out on track, done a lap, and called it quits, because he's been pit road as well, and has been there for an awfully long time. Connor Harrington, though, has been saving the fuel as light as he can with that right foot. Seen him struggle a little bit in terms of the setup of the car, but sometimes, Andrew, even at a track like this, which is so setup dependent, the driver can wrangle a bad machine into victory lane.
Yeah, and more to the point, I think you can fuel strategize your way into this, and I think that's what Connor Harrington is doing right here. Is he hasn't necessarily had the outright pace, but I don't know that we've ever seen what kind of pace this private label team hype car really has, simply because he, in order to go 7 laps and 7 laps, he'll have been fuel saving right from the drop of the green flag. So it is hard to assess his complete setup and his complete speed in that scenario. Although I will say that we have seen him seen the back of the car step out a number of times on him, so it's probably not the best handling car, but at the same time, this is the type of drive and the type of race that Connor Harrington really needed here. The chaos that happened in front of him, around him, Brandon Trano making mistakes, Phil Kraus making mistakes. This has really set up Harrington well for this end of this race. Here's the question: will he be in? No, 1 more lap. So that's going to be just 2 laps on the red tires to end this race for Connor Harrington. That is monumental for him. He's going to be able to push his car like no one else has been able to today.
Only question will be, as he comes across the line to do a 3:20.616, lap time's going to be for Mitchell Welker, whose fastest lap is around the same in terms of overall pace compared to Harrington. Is there more speed to be found in the closing stages? Trano gets past Kraus, who of course is trying to get those softer red compound tires to last for 6 laps, about 3-4 laps longer than you realistically want to be using them for. Rashad Craig will pull down to pit road and make his compound switch, the mandatory switch over to the red marked alternate tires. Mitchell Welker is 32 seconds back from your race leader, and pit lane deltas here difficult to time, but the estimated time on pit lane itself about 41 seconds here, Andrew.
Yeah, so it's going to be very, very close here. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Of course, Connor Harrington, he's only going to be stopped as long as it's going to take them to change the tires. So as long as he gets lined up well, he should be able to get off fairly quickly here. But Harrington's using the push to passes. He's already used one down the first part of the Mulsanne straightaway. And this is going to be so important that he nails this in lap if he's going to have any shot at getting out around Mitchell Welker.
Of course, a chaotic race at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car course yesterday for the NTT IndyCar Series. But the next race on our agenda in the real world is a trip north of the border. We're back in Toronto. We're back on the streets, baby, for what should be a fun race. And Andrew, are you excited about IndyCar's return back to Canada?
Oh, absolutely. Back in my neck of the woods, of course. I live just a couple of hours away from Toronto and from the street circuit. Been there a number of times, and it's a really nice place to watch an IndyCar race. The track's always fun and fast, and especially if you can get a seat in the Turn 3 grandstands, you really get both the sense of the speed and the amount of force that these drivers put through the brakes into that corner. I believe that's Turn 3 at the back there, that off of Shoreline Drive, and like just the amount of force that you can feel from the cars going by you down that straightaway. It's just something to behold.
Should be fun. Cannot wait for that. We wait for Connor Harrington, likely down to pit road this time by. Switch over to the red, softer compound of tire. Mitchell Welker, Porcelli, Treno, Kraus all on the push to pass as they push in these closing stages. The gap to watch is the 31.5 seconds that splits the private label Team Hype number 6. That's working its way through the Porsche curves, and Mitchell Welker's number 9 down through our Nage, lowest point on the track. Can Connor Harrington execute on pit lane for the final time today? 28 kilometers left to go after this trip down pit road. Again, Harrington pushes it on entry, but that looks to be tidy enough. Gets on the anchors, on the limiter, rolls down pit lane.
This is what it all comes down to for Connor Harrington. I don't even think that he necessarily has to get out in front of Mitchell Welker. I think that all he needs is to be within maybe 2 to 3 seconds of Welker, and that's all he'll need with the low fuel, the fresh red tires. I think this should be Connor Harrington's race to lose.
So Harrington will pull into pit stall number 2. Not much fuel needed, just tires to get him to the end of the race. Harrington drops and rolls, Welker's up to speed. It's going to be close between the two of them, and if all it needs to be is close, Connor Harrington in a great spot to pounce on Mitchell Welker, who hits the front once more. 28 kilometers. Number 9's got to defend for his life.
Yeah, this is going to be a very tall order for Mitchell Welker. You can already see that Welker's tires have just started to give up the ghost, and just those fresh reds on Connor Harrington, and just how much grip he had through the Dunlop curves there, through Tetra Rouge here. Welker pushing as hard as he possibly can on exit there. Connor Harrington, meanwhile, nice and tidy. Welker on the push to pass. This is going to be very, very important that he does whatever he can to break the draft, but I don't think he's going to be able to do it. Connor Harrington within a second of Mitchell Welker, and I think that he's going to have the tires to do this. But lurking in the background as well, worth noting, David Porcelli. If these two come to blows here, Porcelli might just be in the captain seat as well, Arjuna.
Mitchell Welker, 3 push-to-passes left in this race. Connor Harrington has 5. How will you deploy them? So many opportunities to use that additional horsepower here today. Remember, even though Welker seems to have a little bit more top-end potential, Connor Harrington, fresher tires through the faster corners where you need that mechanical grip. How close will he be able to stick? Will he have the opportunity to throw a lunge on Mitchell Welker, who leads? A lap and a half left to go as they work themselves to the other side of the Mulsanne. They'll get on the anchors, they'll sweep through the right-hand corner, get back onto the power, and climb their way back towards the start-finish line. Connor Harrington, 3/10 back in closing.
Yeah, you really get the feeling that Connor Harrington is a predator just stalking his prey right now. Both of them on the push to pass now, but Connor Harrington firmly in the draft of Mitchell Welker. It's all going to come down to timing this move. He's got to make sure that he can get it done here. and he's going for the outside move, and that'll set him up onto the inside for Indianapolis, but they're going side by side down here, Arjuna.
Mitchell Welker trying to commit in order to hold the race lead. Whoa, compressed through the right-hander on the entry to Indianapolis and almost spun it around. Harrington compromising Welker through the slowest part of the track, gets around the outside, gets on the power, and gets to the race lead. Connor Harrington with tires underneath him and confidence sailing him through to the front.
And that really shows you, Arjuna, just how much those tires mean, because Mitchell Welker just simply could not put the power down on the outside of Arnage there, and Connor Harrington just drives straight around him, and then through the Porsche curves, through the Corvette curves here, he's just not going to be able to stay anywhere close to Connor Harrington. Look at the gap that Harrington has on Welker already.
It's already a second, and even though that we know that Welker may be a little bit better in a straight line, almost out of that drafting range, as we come to the white flag here at the Circuit de la Sarthe. 14 kilometers left to go. Connor Harrington leads by 1.5 seconds at the line. He's just got to survive. His tires very much looking like they're where he needs them to be. Let's take a look at a RaceSpotTV replay. Let's take a look at something that's happened to Robert Malechka. Just a little bit too snappy through the Porsche curves. The rear wing goes for a little bit of a ride.
And he was not the only one through the Porsche curves. The 17 car also had a big incident right in front of Rashad Craig.
Grab a look at that in a couple of moments' time, but this track can be so difficult. Whether you're racing around it for 24 hours, whether you're racing around it for just a single hour. 20 cars, technically 19, not including Michele Costantini, whittled down to 14, left out on track and running on the lead lap. Costantini still with the fastest lap of the race. Don't think anyone's going to be able to topple him, at least for the time being. Porcelli's trying to close on Welker. Might be one to watch. Last time by was 2 seconds slower, Mitchell Welker. The gap down to 2.2.
And of course, David Porcelli on the black primary tires, Mitchell Welker on those red tires, and it's coming up on that fourth lap for Welker, and he is just hanging on for all that he can right now. And Porcelli, his black tires are going to be just coming right into the prime of their life right now, so this could be very interesting coming up. I don't know that Porcelli is quite close enough, but it's going to be very interesting. If he can get a run through the Corvette curves, he might have a shot into the final chicane.
Really nicely done through the Michelin chicane, that second chicane. We didn't mention it, but of course remember the ACO and IMSO, as ties across the pond continue to get closer. That first chicane on the Mulsanne, now called the Daytona chicane. Of course the bus stop at the Daytona International Speedway, now known as the Le Mans chicane. Through onto the back stretch they come for the final time today. Traino, after his ordeals of today, finishing outside of the podium as it stands right now. Porcelli 1.3 back, continuing to close just bit by bit. Andrew mentioned the issue for Calasibetta. Let's see what happens to him in front of Rashad Craig. Whoa, that's a vicious snap of a moment there. Demerit as well as Rashad Craig. Lucky that car didn't bounce back.
Yeah, you could tell that the car just was irretrievable there, and certainly a heart and mouth moment for both Craig and Demerit here. Right on board with Demerit, but he gets a little bit on that curb, and the car just continues to rotate, and nothing you can do about that.
7/10 the gap at the front now between second and third. Harrington already well and truly through the Porsche curves, as Welker has just a couple more corners to hang on with those red compound tires. The grip is going, but the will to go is still there. Mitchell Welker looks to have done enough on the run down into the final chicanes to hold on to second place here in round 4 of your 2022 season 3. But once again, through the carnage, through the smoke, Connor Harrington emerges victorious on a Monday night. He wins at the Circuit de la Sarthe. Mitchell Welker, David Porcelli make up the rest of the podium. What a story we had to talk about here today.
Yeah, that was that was certainly not the race that we thought that we were in for when we signed up for this race, because it looked for the first stint that Brandon Trainer was going to run away from this field. Then he makes a mistake and loses all that time. Then, of course, the seminal moment of the race, Arjuna, that moment down into that first chicane, the Daytona chicane, where Phil Kraus just gets into the back of Brandon Trainer and gives Trainer that damage that causes him to have a rear wing change, and then Harrington with the fuel strategy play that just ultimately was the correct call and won him this race. So it was a fascinating race to watch and really entertaining stuff.
Will we do it again? You can help us figure it out. Our schedule's community driven on the iRacing forums. Have your input as to where the future of this series will take us as we look towards 7 road courses, 5 ovals in the future in the next series looking forward. Let's take a look though at our race results as we wait, for the final cars to come across the line. Big lap. Going to take a while for the stragglers to finish up here today. So while we do that, while we wait for our post-race interviews, let's talk about where we're going next, Andrew, because this is one that we're maybe a little bit worried about, trepidation seeping in, but we're also excited about seeing what a new draft model does as we head to Twin Ring Motegi, to the oval there, that unfortunately does not see any use in the real world anymore.
Yes, and it is a shame that this facility was damaged by the earthquake in Japan several years ago, because it truly is a unique oval and a really fun place to drive. This car and this tire model, it makes it a very difficult challenge, but at the same time, it's a fun challenge, and it really is a driver's track. It's an egg-shaped oval, similar to Gateway, but much faster, much bigger, and much more banked, so it produces higher speeds and higher drama. And the best part about it, I think, is that it is so wide that it just invites, when the draft permits it, we've seen 3, 4, even 5 wide action in the past, so it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out with the new draft model, as you mentioned, because we should see a little bit closer action than the last time we were there. So definitely looking forward to seeing what happens in 1 week's time.
See, I actually quite prefer the road course to the oval, at least in my opinion. I think the road course, very, very underrated, one that maybe could get used a little bit more across of the iRacing service, but July 11th, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Join us for the first of back-to-back ovals. 2 weeks from today, we head to Ohio for some short track racing. Let's dive into post-race interviews. Let's dive down to Victory Lane, where Connor Harrington is standing by. Connor, another race where you had some decent pace, you had some good strategy, but more chaos at the front enabled you to slide your way through nice and easily.
Yeah, it's always good when a private label team hype driver doesn't have any chaos at Le Mans. But yeah, we just I don't think we had the pace to hang with Trainer. I mean, we had the 1 lap pace. We were pretty close, and my Q lap was okay. Maybe he had more in the bag, but we kind of figured that the play was going to be to run the reds as little as possible, and we ended up making that strategy work thanks to the chaos.
And in terms of the tire management, just how tricky was it on the red alternate tires to make things happen? Was that why the call to do the fuel saving was so critical?
Yeah, I mean, we tried just about everything to keep the car as low drag as we could and run the reds for more than 2 laps, and it just wasn't happening at all for us. So we quickly decided that at that point, if we couldn't, run away from the pack to underdrive the reds and make them last, we were just going to save fuel and run 2 stints of 7 there.
Well, congratulations on the win, Connor. Hopefully we'll see you back in action a week from now as we head to Twin Ring Motegi.
Yep, thanks guys. Have a good night.
Connor Harrington from the private label Team Hype finishes on the top step of the podium, but down on step number 2, Mitchell Welker joins us now. And Mitchell, another fun race at the front for you. Talk to us about what you saw.
I saw a lot, didn't I? The biggest thing was that big wreck into the first Mulsanne chicane, which I took real advantage of. That hurt Brandon's rear wing, so he had the wing change. Came out in the lead. I soon realized that I was going to have to go too long in the reds, and I saw what Connor was doing, staying out the extra lap or 2, and that was definitely the correct call. And I guess I should have just done more race prep, but I'm just so happy right now. It's first podium for All-American iRacers on Indy Open Road. So I'm just really happy to have got it for the guys.
And when you were, getting ready for today, trying to figure out downforce settings, how did that process work? Did you ever contemplate higher downforce, lower downforce, especially when you jumped into a cold race session?
No, I just ran the iRacing provided open set.
There you go, nice and simple. Well, congratulations on second, Mitch. Hopefully not the last time that we talk to you here this season.
Hopefully not. I'll see you guys around.
Well, turns out iRacing provided sets can be quite good, but David Porcelli back in third was the only one of those front runners to run the alternate tire in the middle stretch of the race. Talk to us about that decision, David, and of course talk to us about that moment down into the first chicane.
Yeah, well, that's what I was trying to avoid by going off strategy. I knew that the Reds were going to be weak, and I wanted a car that I could really rely on exit at the end of the race. I knew the Reds were just going to fall off. And after seeing that I wasn't able to fuel save on that first stint, I decided that it would be best to get the Reds out of the way in the middle. It ended up working for me until, of course, what happened there at the end.
From your perspective, this car, this track, not something we would usually talk about in the real world. How did it race out there on the track?
Oh, I thought it was a blast. The Reds are a nightmare, so you really have to minimize the amount of laps that you have on them. But on the blacks, it's really fun. It's it's something else. I've done quite a few of these special event 24-hour races here. So yeah, I knew this would be a strong track for me because of how many laps I've had on it.
David Porcelli rounds out the podiums. Congratulations.
Thanks so much, Arjuna. I'll see you next time.
And that will wrap up our post-race interviews, of course. We didn't even take a look at those race results, so let's quickly go through them. Connor Harrington wins by 1.8 seconds. Photo finish for second. Mitchell Welker beating out David Porcelli by just 1/100th of a second there for those second and third steps on the podiums. Brandon Traino's day went from bad to worse. First with the self-inflicted mistake, and then the chaos that Phil Kraus caused. Traino in front of Kraus, 4th and 5th on track. Daniel Yeaman in front of Christopher Demerit and Rashad Craig, while Brendan Lichtenberg, Sean Ryan, 9th and 10th. Ryan able to recover after some difficult moments for him out on the track. Frankie D, Kevin Burrell, Cameron Hill, and Chris Wilhite. The rest of the cars on the lead lap with Kalasabeta, the 17, 1 lap down. Malechka, hard crash for him through the Porsche curves. Very similar to what the 17 had, although at a slightly different point of the corner. Both retiring. Kopke, Costantini, Ortiz, Roberts, the rest of the cars that didn't make it to the end. And Andrew, as we look at the schedule once more, as we get set for back-to-back ovals, the thing we always talk about, the diversity of American open wheel racing, what a second half of the season we've got to look forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. Not just twin ring Motegi, but then you've got the short track at Iowa, you've got the Indianapolis GP track, then a 1.5 miler at Charlotte, Sonoma, Gateway, Pocono, Watkins Glen. These are some classic IndyCar tracks to round out the schedule for the final 4 weeks as well. So definitely an exciting lineup that we have going on here, but it all starts out in 1 week's time at Twin Ring Motegi.
That race and every race of this 2022 Season 3 in the iRacing Open IndyCar Championship live on RaceSpotTV. We thank you for joining us once more on a Monday night where we kick off your iRacing week with some of the most fun entertainment, excitement that you can find on the iRacing official competition. It's a quietish week here on RaceSpotTV. Not too much, but of course do remember, if you want to keep involved with us, head on over to racespot.wtf/Discord, and if you're not already subscribed to us on YouTube, hit that red button, the bell next to it, to get notified every single time we go live with a great sim racing series that we get to cover. On behalf of the team behind the scenes, and for Andrew Kinsella, my name is Arjuna Kankipati, signing off from the Circuit de la Sarthe. We continue our globe-trotting adventures 7 days from now. It's Connor Harrington, though, on top once more here in the iRacing IndyCar Open Series.